Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Gaming Mix podcast from Analog Stick Gaming. My name is Jordan. To my right, as always, is the founder of Analog Stick Gaming, Jeff. And today we have a very special short episode. So, this won't be a specific episode number, but we have a preview for a game called Of Ashen Steel that we've both managed to play up to a couple of hours of. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yeah, so the demo itself is kind of a small slice of what appears to be kind of the opening of the game. Now, we were told specifically that the demo was going to be about 2 hours of play, but I've played considerably more than 2 hours, and have not appeared to be where the end of the demo is yet. But this is the kind of the first time that people have had hands-on with the game really for a preview. I know IGN did one last year, but it was hands off. So
Yes.
this is kind of the first time that the public's been able to kind of enjoy the game
Yeah.
without being there at the studio or being at a convention.
Yeah. And I also know that Jeff has played quite a bit more than me because I've run into a few issues and we have somewhat opposing opinions on what we think of this game so far. But I also think that we both see some promise in the game, so this should make for a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, one of the
Before
reasons
we,
why initially I wasn't going to even play the preview is because I don't have a gaming laptop. I don't have
Hmm.
a gaming PC or anything like that. So we wanted to see what Jordan was describing was sounded good to me, even though it wasn't sounding good to him. And then so I installed it, and initially I had some issues where the game would lock up. Eventually, I was
yeah,
able to kind of turn everything down to low and then reboot the game, and then slowly start incrementing things up to see where the threshold was where
yes,
I was crashing. Now, I haven't tried it on the Steam Deck. It could very well run a lot better on the Steam Deck than it does run on my laptop. But yeah, I've experienced some weird glitches, but I mean, this is a preview. It's to be expected.
yeah. At the end of the day, we're not really here to talk about the technical nature of the game because at the end of the day, this is a preview build and it's not representative of the final game. You know, this is a
It's a
tiny
tiny build.
slice. Yeah, it's a tiny slice of a tiny build game. So, you know, we'll we'll get into all of that. But before we talk about what we actually played and what our experiences have been with it so far, Jeff, why don't you explain to people what Of Ashen and Steel actually is for those that don't know?
Yeah. So Of Ashen Steel is made by a developer called Fire and Frost, and their goal as a studio is to make games that are inspired by RPGs of the 2000s, and a lot of that kind of comes down to kind of I guess their capabilities of a studio of crafting kind of like what I like to call Eurojank games. So this is very similar to games like Gothic or games like Risen. It reminded me a lot of, I think, Risen 4, I think is the one I'm thinking of, the pirate one. But it reminds me a lot of those games. Like if at the beginning of this game, if it said a game developed by Piranha Bytes, I would have completely believed it because this feels like Elix and that kind of stuff. It feels like those Eurojank style games where these are games that are built specifically through passion and not necessarily through funding, because like you can tell that like this is a very low budget game. This is designed around being a
Yes.
very specific thing, and I think that a lot of people who want that kind of old classic art, like old school RPG, are going to love this game, especially due to the fact that there are no objective markers. If it's like, hey, I
Yes.
need you to find something, you have a compass that kind of, can kind of help you. But
Yeah.
like, one of the things in the game is it's like, hey, get rid of all my barrels. There's like 17 barrels around this guy's property, and you have to find the two that you can actually move. Like so, like a lot of that stuff is where like even the guy like in a cutscene, he's like, yeah, you just take this path here to go, and I'm like, which path? Because there's a path that goes this way, there's a path that goes that way. So it has that kind of discoverability
Yeah.
to it, that I think a lot of people will like. And like it has like zero yellow paint. There is zero of where you really need to go in these things.
Mhm.
It has that kind of classic feel to it.
Yeah.
And it's not meant, this is not meant to be a visual like it's not meant to be a title that's the competition between like what AAA is doing, you know,
This isn't even
that kind of game.
this isn't even trying to be Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, you know?
No, but I will say that it has like the weapon sharpening where you can kind of tilt the angle and turn it and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and it
Yeah.
has like deep layers of customization and abilities and things like that. I still find it kind of funny that you go into like, and we'll get into it more, but you go into like your ability of like upping your skills just to yourself, and somehow it's like, yeah, it's going to cost you like 50 gold. Am I paying myself for these skills? Like that's the thing that's kind of weird, but
That's funny. Yeah.
yeah, like
So
it is a classic kind of uh,
yeah.
RPG where you kind of find your way through what the description is for certain things, and like
Yes.
there's not even like you'll when you go into like a village to find these like little things, the guys like go and find them, they'll be glittering with like little yellow sparkles and stuff. So it does have some aspect of like, hey, you need to go find this stuff. But that's what this game is essentially. It is like
Yeah.
a Eurojank RPG that is like Elix, that
Yes.
is like Gothic, that is like that stuff. And these guys are inspired by The Witcher. They're inspired by like everything that's kind of come before. And I think that they kind of pull it off to a certain point, but we'll obviously get more into it.
Definitely. So I want to bring up some gameplay here, and this is very early gameplay, like I said, of a preview build. They allowed us to capture the preview build, which is cool because not all of these things do. So thank you to them for allowing us to do that. Just bear in mind when you're seeing this, like I said, it's really early in what we got to play, but I'm just using it to illustrate some of the things I want to talk about. So we'll bring it up here. And it is going to be muted just because of potential copyright issues. I'm going to actually fast forward slightly. There we go. So, as you can see, and this is one of my small issues with the game, but it's not a game breaking or experience breaking thing. Because this is more of a Eurojank game, character models are not good. Like, they are not they're not even on par with some of the AA games of today, right?
Yeah, like this is developed in Unreal Engine 4. So there is some, I guess like light use of a lot of those types of tools that we're kind of seeing with like Unreal Engine 5.
Yes.
But yeah, like the character models, like the animations, I think are fairly okay. Like some characters will make kind of gestures and certain things during conversation. Your main character, there's no customization during the build. However, I was reading that there is customization to a certain extent. Like you can change his hair and certain things, but you're not making like a completely different character. This is still going to be Triss. But here, you're a cartographer. You've basically woken up on this beach. You're feeling like sick and whatnot, and you're going around trying to find kind of a potion or something to essentially alleviate that stomach. And you kind of go through all these different little quests before you can talk to the captain, which kind of progresses the story forward. So you kind of meet these little characters and talk with them. Some people want you to find certain things. Like I think it was this guy or one of the other guys where he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Or he's looking for something, and then the guy that's coming up here with the green vest, he's thrown it somewhere, and you have to find it. I actually found it before.
So
he even mentioned
that I actually got stuck on originally because I was like, where do I find this thing?
Because I threw it up on a rock and I'm sitting here, I'm like trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, where on the shore can I do that? But it's actually a little ladder right to your side where like you climb up and you jump. So it kind of teaches you
But
that
it's
there is
funny
like
because
mantling mechanics.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's one of my other, and this is a more major issue with the game. The jumping is bad, like,
Yeah,
and
the jumping's not terribly great, but it is very generous on being able to mantle up. Like you'll think that you might not be able to make the jump, but then he just mantles up anyways. And there is
yeah,
like later on you'll get trapped in a room and you can't get out. So you go and you find like a box, and you pick the box up and you move it over to a broken staircase and then jump from that to the staircase to get out. So there is
yes.
nice little like mechanics like that that you normally don't see in most games.
You end up fighting this guy here
Yeah.
with another person's wooden leg, which I
Yeah.
thought was
I was
hilarious.
looking for like because it goes go find a weapon and then it shows a screenshot of like these swords on like a box, and I ran around the entire camp looking for it, and then I go and talk to this guy. He's like, "Hey, do you know where I can find a weapon?" He's like, "Take my leg here." I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna do this.
So I'm gonna actually turn off the gameplay now, just because I don't know how much we can or can't show.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about things that I did like with the game, because as I said, I have some issues. I'm not as much of a fan of Eurojank games as Jeff is. I definitely understand their charm, but I feel like they can sometimes have significant barriers that impact the experience. Obviously, this is a preview build, so I think a lot of this stuff will be sort of ironed out and improved over time. For example, during this build, there is controller support, but it's still being polished up and optimized, and therefore certain things are definitely better on mouse and keyboard at this point in time. But by the time
Yeah.
you play the game,
It
it's
also
probably
doesn't
going to
help
be
that
different.
like there's currently no plans for a console version.
Yes.
So like it is very PC focused. So like I played it with mouse and keyboard, and
Yes.
it seemed to be fine. Like you use the left stick to kind of bring out, or sorry, the left mouse button to bring out your weapon. If you want to sheath it, you press R. Interacting is with E. You have your 4 items in the bottom left corner that you can map to things like apples
Yes.
or like your potions, and those are using Z, X, C, and V. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, like it's I don't know, like it is a Eurojank game through and through. Like it plays like that. So if you've played, you know, of those types of games, if you played
If
anything
you've
from
played
Spiders, if
any,
you
I
played
was going to say,
anything
if
from
you've played anything
yeah,
from Jeff's favorite developer,
yeah,
Spiders.
anything from Spiders, anything from Piranha Bytes, like if you played those types of games or the guys that made like Gothic and whatnot, um, that's what this is. Like
Yeah.
it plays like that kind of stuff, and it even looks like that stuff because it is pulling from that era. It's not
Yeah.
it's not like trying to look like a 2025 game.
So the things I really like about this game, because I'm gonna hand it off to Jeff to talk about more because he's played more, but the things that I really like is, Jeff mentioned it already, no waypoints, and you have to kind of figure things out on your own, but the game doesn't ever feel directionless either, because it gives you enough information to actually figure these things out by yourself.
Yeah,
And also, there are clearly multiple ways to do things. So, for example, quite early on in the game, or in this build that we played, you're trying to find a remedy to cure your sickness that you're feeling, right? And you find some basically beer for this guy, and then it's 3 bottles, but you can actually give one of his bottles away to one of the other crewmates,
hmm
or you can give him all 3 bottles, and depending on what you do, that can make things play out differently. And I like that kind of stuff because that's the
yeah,
sign of a good RPG, right? You can the guy that I fought with the other man's wooden leg, you can give him an apple and he'll give you more information about things. Um, there's lots of interesting little things you can do, and I do think this is in terms of an RPG. This game is very, very promising, but you're going to have to deal with some of that jankiness and Eurojank nature of things to kind of get to the real meat and potatoes of this game and the interesting stuff, I think. Another thing that I really enjoyed was actually the dialogue, surprisingly. Like, I thought it was quite well written, it's quite interesting. There's a character in here that stutters, and then you can like stutter back to him, almost like you're making fun of him. And there's different little fun things you can do in terms of interactions, which I really enjoyed. And I like the kind of the dynamic nature of it, right? Because there are some light sort of survival mechanics in here.
Yeah,
as well.
You have to make sure you're fed, or you have like something to drink, and you find that stuff pretty frequently. You can sit around a campfire and then cook meals as well too. You'll need certain ingredients and things like that. There's shops to come by. There's bodies to kind of salvage them from, and camps that you'll find abandoned or not abandoned, and you'll basically kill the people there and take their stuff.
And so I think, overall, although I have some issues with the janky nature, and I do think some of that stuff will be improved as the controller support is polished up as we get towards launch and things. So hopefully, I'm hoping that we get a chance to go hands-on again with it in the future. That would be quite nice to see how the game progresses, and it's definitely one that we'll keep an eye on. But Jeff, you have played a bit more of this than me because I ran into some technical issues that made me need to restart the build and everything.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience of what you've played so far?
Well, so they kind of touch on the story that you're there to kind of like deliver a letter. You're part of this order that's kind of grouped up with a bunch of other people, and an event that kind of transpires that sees you attacked and all your valuables stolen. And one of those things is the letter that you have to get to the order. So you're stuck on this planet. You're stuck on this giant planet. You're stuck on this island, and you kind of have to like retrace your steps of like, okay, I recognize the person who stole this stuff, so you're kind of trying to get there, but you're also trying to get to this major city, so you can kind of explain things and certain stuff. So you're kind of like, you start out at this camp where you've been kind of like rescued by this guy, and he's like, hey, can you do these chores for me? And you do those chores, and then eventually you get a weapon, you get some like armor and clothes and stuff like that, and you kind of make your way out into the world, and that stuff's been kind of great. Like the area that you start out with, you find these like wolf type of things that you're fighting, and then eventually like people and stuff. There's these big bugs that will like just really, really kill you quickly.
Yeah, because as you mentioned earlier, this is very Witcher inspired, so you will fight human enemies, but you'll also fight monsters and
like early on
bugs.
You fight like big giant bugs and stuff like that. You fight these like wolf-like creatures and stuff. I found this big giant like bear type thing that just like one-shotted me. I found this like alpha wolf that I was kind of dancing with a little while and eventually killed. Now the combat in this game is, I'm going to say it's very much like a combination between the first and second Witcher.
Interesting. Okay.
It doesn't play like you would expect with certain things. There's a little bit of a delay. Like you can parry attacks, and when you do that, it's kind of this like exchange of attacks through an animation, and then you get the final slice, and then that damages them. You can back up as well. The timing has to be very precise. There's like certain animation strings that you'll hit at a certain point, and then that's what causes that little riposte.
I will say that I did feel like the aim for like even trying to kind of direct your melee attacks in the right way isn't quite as precise
Yeah,
as I would
even
like
if
it
you
to be.
have it locked on, you could swipe and then they'll move around, and it's really tough to kind of almost move around in some instances. And there's one part where I was fighting these two guys, and they got me on this one side, and they kept stabbing me to the point where every single time I could get back into control, one guy would stab me, and then it was just this constant barrage where I could not do anything, and I just got
Oh
completely
God.
butchered. And that
Yeah.
happens a lot, where like you just don't feel like you are in control of the situation to a certain extent. And I think that might be the
Yeah.
intent, where you're meant to be overwhelmed.
Because you're
Um,
not a warrior, right? That's the thing, is
yeah, he's
you're
just
not
a
playing a warrior.
cartographer who's
Yeah.
surprisingly ripped. But
And
yeah,
it does
like
make me laugh because they early on they keep calling him the navigator as well, like a navigator, and actually that's not what he is.
no. Yeah, so you'll get your weapons. There's like workbenches that you can kind of tinker in and kind of improve those weapons, improve your armor. There's places where you can kind of like cook your meals and things like that. So there's a lot of survivability type of aspects to it. There's a lot of mechanics
But
to kind of
then
make your
they
character stronger.
they didn't feel overly punishing, like the survival elements.
No, not from what I was seeing at all. Basically, like he'll say specifically, he's like, "Man, I'm thirsty," and so you'll get an idea. But there are little like um, values that you kind of took a look at with certain meters and things like
Yes.
that too.
Yeah.
You can't use items during combat, so you can't use healing items during combat. You have to like sheath your sword, drink a potion, then unsheath it. And there's targeting as well too. I couldn't figure out how to move my targeting. Um, but
Neither could I.
yeah, like it's one thing that's nice is like say you encounter like a couple planks that are over an area that you can't get on, you can actually jump and then mantle up and then go over. So it gives you a lot more freedom. Like I always found it weird when you're walking down a hallway and there's like a tipped chair and like a table on its side, and like, well, I can't go there. Like this, so this feels like you don't have those types of barriers.
Yeah, it sort of gives you a bit more freedom to get around things,
Yeah,
right, and get over things. That's
but
that's
it's
definitely true.
yeah, like it is like I've enjoyed it to a certain extent. Like I can see the kind of early promise to it.
Yeah.
I'm still fine with a lot of like the kind of jankiness to it, because I mean, like I've played Elix, and that's one of the most janky Eurojank games
Yes.
I've ever
Yeah.
played.
And I
Um,
will say, although I have some issues with the jankiness, this is far from the jankiest game that I've played.
yeah,
It's just that for people, when you consider some of the other amazing RPGs that we have these days, I don't want people going in expecting, for example, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, because this game of Ash and Steel is not even aiming to be that. And Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 isn't even a AAA game in its own right. You
yeah.
know, so it's kind of like I just want to put people's expectations
Well,
in the right place.
to a certain extent, like if you gave me this game when it was finished, when it was
Yeah.
actually done and made for console, so I can just play it on my TV, I'd rather play this than Kingdom Come 1 or 2, because of just how like I like this type of game more than kind of like the hyper realistic
This
stuff that
feel this feels
Kingdom
like an
2 does.
old school. This feels like an old school RPG from kind of the the kind of mid to early 2000s or late 90s. You know, it's
Hmm.
taking a lot of inspiration from those earlier Witcher games, I would say, um, and a few other things. And it's just it the the stuff that they're inspired by is the things they're doing well. The RPG stuff seems really, really promising. Genuinely think this could be a really good RPG when all is said and done.
Yeah. Well,
I would go
the
on.
the one thing with combat as well too, that they kind of like they don't introduce well enough. They basically just bring up a menu and they're like, hey, you can do this. Is you can have your combat styles where it's like either like up, down, or middle, and then they have different speeds and different abilities and stuff. So that's kind of neat. it's kind of weird because you'll have like your combat swing and stuff is like your mouse button, but like Q is like a stronger attack that uses more of your stamina. I do find that your stamina like depletes very quickly, and when you have no stamina, you can't do fuck all. So that's my biggest issue is I think like the stamina usage is a bit much. Now I haven't played too much around with like the skill trees and stuff because I haven't really got too far. This is just a preview demo, so that you don't really get the ability to kind of progress. There isn't like a save file or something that has us later in the game and gives us more.
The best way to explain for people that don't know how these kinds of previews work, this is a very early hands-on demo, essentially, right? And the idea behind these kinds of hands-on sessions are just to give you a rough sense of what they're aiming for with the game. And then usually what will happen is as we get a bit closer to release, there'll probably be some more hands-on sort of opportunities, usually a little bit more extensive. Like if you've been following us for a while, you'll know that a few months before Assassin's Creed Shadows came out, I got to go hands-on with it for 4 hours for our friends at the Outer Haven, and so usually with these kinds of games, when you get closer to release, you'll have another opportunity. But as Jeff said, these early kind of small, maximum of 2 hours of playing sort of previews, they don't want to show you everything. They're just trying to give you a sense of the game itself. Yeah. And I think they did a good job at that.
They give you a good chunk at the beginning because you kind of get the whole opening area, which is its own little thing, and then you kind of get thrown into this like little open world area, which I haven't explored too much of the map or anything, but yeah. You have to get to this major city to kind of progress the plot a bit more, and you keep running into like people that are like, this one guy wants you to go and help him ransack a village. And then you kind of go there, and then this other guy, you show up, and he's like, "Oh, you finally showed up." It's like, "I need you to feed my guys," and blah blah blah. And you're like, "No, I'm actually not this guy." It's like, "I can't hear you too much. I don't hear too well." And then you kind of get caught into that little side quest and stuff. All while there's like monsters everywhere, where it's like you can't sleep because like there's danger nearby.
Yeah. So what I would say is the early signs for Alvashan still are promising, but there are definitely some issues that need ironing out and improving before this game releases. At least from my perspective, Jeff, who's someone that has more experience with these Eurojank kind of games, obviously does feel slightly differently about that, but I think we both recognize that, this is a very early hands-on, and it's the first time people have really had the opportunity to go hands-on themselves with the game. There has been some more gameplay and things shown, as Jeff mentioned, like IGN have already seen a significant chunk of the game in the past, but they didn't play it themselves. So it's this has gone from a game that I'd heard about but I hadn't really looked into, to a game that is now going to stay on my radar to at least keep tabs on, because I do think it's a promising old school RPG for people that liked Western RPGs in the kind of Xbox 360 sort of era of gaming, and a little bit before that, are probably going to enjoy this game, I would say. As long as you don't go in expecting a 2025 AAA level of polish to this experience, because that's not what you're going to get, and it's not what they're even trying to be.
Yeah, like this is a game that it's a game mostly about like being immersed in this world and its mechanics and stuff like that, more so than it's like visual identity and stuff like that. Like it's again,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a game that's going to like blow your socks off or anything visually,
Yeah,
but it
and
you know
also it's characters, right? Like I mentioned earlier.
yeah
But its characters are actually really important because, for example, it will tell you go and find someone, but it won't tell you where they are because there's no waypoints, right? And it will say like go and find the, I don't know, the medic, for example. But when you go up to them, it doesn't say, "Oh, hey, I'm the medic." It just tells you what their name is, like their actual name in the video game.
yeah
So you then have to remember who they are based on what they're wearing, based on the way they speak to you, all these
yeah.
kind of things.
There's a guy later on that says like his brother went somewhere, whatever, and he hasn't seen him in a while, but all he knows is that he wears a red scarf. So
Yeah.
you're going to have to eventually keep an eye out for this one, this guy with a red scarf.
Well, I
Um,
like that kind of stuff because it makes the experience, especially as an RPG, so much more engaging because you're actually paying more attention to each individual character that you meet, and you never know when you're going to speak to someone and they're going to pull you into this massive side quest, or when you're seemingly going to do something that feels a little meaningless in the moment, but actually that person might help you later. Like the guy who I got the wooden leg off, for example, I squashed some bugs for him before that, and it's that it just kind of makes you think, oh, if I didn't do this, what would have happened? Or if I did this instead, what would have happened? And to me, that's a promising sign of a good RPG is when you're starting to think about what the possibilities are and how things could have gone differently potentially in different situations. It means they know what they're doing, is what I would say. This team clearly know what they want to make. They're clearly in. They have very clear inspirations, and they seem to be following those inspirations through to the end. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on this one. But we got a little bit of time left here, Jeff. So is there anything else you'd like to say about the game before we close out this
well, I mean,
special episode?
there's a bit more to combat as well too, like using like ranged, because I think you can eventually use a bow. There's magic as well too. I haven't dealt with any of the magic. I've mostly just been dealing with like the sword or the axe, which you have to level up appropriately to have certain stats to the weapons that you can kind of use. So like the first axe you get, you have to have strength 12, and I had strength of 10 at the time, so I'm still using a sword and still leveling up and fighting creatures and earning experience and stuff like that. I do kind of wish that you could use potions and in healing stuff during combat. But the nice thing about it is enemy tracking is pretty lax, so you can usually like run away, heal, and then get back into everything. But I do hope they kind of fix the bouncing around of getting like hit so often to the point where you can't get back up, because like the enemies will attack you as you're getting up, and you don't have any choice in the matter of
It
whether or not you're
almost
taking the
doesn't
damage or
give
not.
you a window to get away from them, right? Like
No,
if they
like
hit you,
there's the blocking or the parrying and stuff that you can kind of wiggle your way out of in certain areas, but like if you get stuck on something, you're just getting stuck on something. So it's got that end of it, but no, like it's neat from what I've seen so far. Like it is, an early build. I mean, they're probably months ahead of whatever build this is right now, so a lot of things have probably generally been fixed. I'm gonna love to see this if it comes out on console.
I mean, what I will say is, although there's obviously no plans for a console version
Not that
right
I'm
now,
reading, anyways.
that as far as we know, there's no plans for a console version right now. But what I will say is, given that they are clearly adding controller support, if they ever do decide to port this thing over to console, that's going to be much easier to do when the controller support is already there, right? So good on them for that. I want to say, obviously, thank you to the publisher and to the developers for allowing us to get this early hands-on opportunity, because it's definitely something we've enjoyed. We like bringing these types of content to you. This is obviously a video. Sometimes we do these in video format, but if you didn't know, we also write a lot of stuff over on the website, Analog Stick Gaming. And, we're going to start doing, hopefully, some more previews written up over there as well. So make sure you check out all of that stuff. But as I say, Jeff, any final thoughts on Of Ashen Still before we get out of here today?
No, I think that honestly, I think it has a lot of potential. I mean, interested to see this title kind of grow, and with the kind of rebounding back into a lot of classic games, because we got the Gothic remake that's going to be coming out as well too. I mean, they're also remaking the very first Witcher as well too. So, no, I'm eager to kind of see where this game kind of goes, just because I think Piranha Bytes is gone. So we don't have that studio pretty much anymore to make another Elix or anything like that. Spires is working on Greedfall and making it more tactical, which is more away from what I was kind of looking for. So
Yes.
this developer kind of has the chance of kind of stepping into being that replacement.
Yeah, they
for that
feel
kind of stuff.
it almost feels like this game and this developer has the opportunity to fill a space that is currently available within the gaming market.
Yeah, it's currently
And
shrinking.
and it's going to be interesting to see how well they can do that as this game does eventually make its way to release. I don't think we have an official announced release date yet, so
No, it just
unfortunately,
says that it's supposed to release essentially sometime this year on PC. So that's
yeah.
all I've
So I
seen so
mean, we'll
far.
keep an eye out for that. We'll obviously, keep you updated with any news over on analogstickgaming.com. We'll make sure we have all the news of Ashen Still and all other games as well. When this does eventually come to PC, to continue our content of it, I will make the commitment right now that I will, um, hopefully, hopefully if the time comes and we can get access to it, I'll actually bring you some here on the YouTube channel, uh, so that we can kind of sit, talk about the game. You can see me playing it and things like that, hopefully. And, make sure you're subscribed for that stuff. Obviously, this has been a special preview episode of the Gaming Mix podcast, but we do have a full podcast here on the YouTube channel, which you can go and check out right now. Our last two episodes before this one was Jeff and our good friend Keith from the Outer Haven talking about the recent implosion at Microsoft and how that's affected Xbox and many of their studios. And we've also had an episode with our good friend MBZ Naman that we filmed a few weeks ago, but that we've been kind of holding in our back pocket, about the Nintendo Switch 2, because he's a big Nintendo fan. But he also works for the publisher PlayStack, who is perhaps most well known at this point for publishing Balatro, the indie darling of last year. And so we did have a bit of a conversation with him about that as well. So you can go and check those things out on the channel right now. Obviously, comment below if you're interested in Of Ashen Still. If you have any further questions that we haven't answered here, leave them below in the comments and we'll get back to them in our next episode of the podcast, because we're actually filming that a few days after you'll be seeing this episode up on the channel. So we can get back to any questions that we may not have answered here. Should we be able to provide an answer to them, we will. So make sure you do that. Obviously, follow us on social media. We use Blue Sky mostly these days, so all the links are below. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this preview. We look forward to bringing you more coverage of Ashen Still in the future. And for now, that was the Gaming Mix podcast, and we will see you next time. But goodbye.